Well, welcome everyone to the webinar on partnering with academics. I'm Gabriel, I'm the projects officer here at Beacon, and I'll be your host today. So first of all, let's do some housekeeping. As you can tell, we'll be using Zoom today. So if you have any technical difficulties or if you'd like to communicate with anyone from Beacon staff and any other participants, please, you can use the chat function. And similarly, you can use the Q&A function to type your questions in the Q&A box, which we'll aim to answer at the end. If you'd like to use subtitles, this is something that can be done on Zoom. The way you would do it is you go to the bottom black bar and you can click on the live transcript function. You can turn it on and you can turn it off as you go. And you can also view the live transcript at the side of your screen. And for those of you who are new in the room, I'm going to introduce Beacon. Beacon is a UK-based rare disease charity with a vision of a world in which no one faces the rare journey alone, and with a mission to build a united rare disease community with patient groups at its heart. The way we do this, or the way we aim to fulfill this mission and vision, is through three different streams. One of the things that we do is patient group training, like this webinar, where we aim to support patient groups to form, to grow, and to professionalize, empowering patient groups to provide emotional and practical support to their communities. We're also involved in rare research by helping patient groups find a place at the heart of research so that they can ensure better outcomes and improve access. And we're also aiming to create or unify this rare community, facilitating connections and collaborations to help grow and strengthen the rare disease community. Today's team is myself, I'm the projects officer, and we also have Elizabeth with us, who is our lovely events officer, and Megan, who is our Senior Scientific Projects Officer, who will also be a speaker today, and obviously Rick as well, who is our CEO, who we will also speak. So please just put anything in the chat if you have any technical difficulties or would like to speak with any of us. Elizabeth will be very happy to help you. And the reason why we're having this webinar today is because 95% of rare diseases lack approved treatment, which means that accelerating research progress is a top priority for many patient organizations. However, collaborating between patient groups and academics is key to speeding up treatments, improving care, and keeping research patient-centric. But this is often challenging and difficult. And there's limited awareness of rare diseases in academia. And many times, knowing how to find and connect with academics can be really challenging for patient groups. So today we will be discussing how academic research works and what are the structures that shape it. We'll also discuss where to find researchers working on your condition and how you could connect with them. We'll aim to cover practical ways to boost the appeal of your patient group to researchers to facilitate these collaborations. And we'll also cover some real-world examples from a patient group and academics with lived experience in this subject. I'd like to thank our supporters, the Community Fund, Vertex, and Amicus. And now I'd like to introduce our speakers for today. First of all, we'll have Megan, who again is our Senior Scientific Projects Officer, Mel Dixon, the founder and trustee of CureDH DDS. We'll also have Rick, our CEO, and Laura Bermejo, who's the Scientific Director of Ramón y Cajal Research Institute, but also the EATRIS Spanish node. I'll just go through the agenda quickly so that we know what's happening. Again, Megan will introduce the academic structures and the current landscape. Then Mel will follow with her story, the experience and the actions she took to boost the appeal of her patient group to academics. Then Rick will introduce how patient groups can identify and connect with academics. And then we'll have Mel again talk about how she found these right academics and what opportunities that has brought for her organization. And lastly, we'll have Laura talk about the academic perspective on these collaborations. Questions, you can put them in the Q&A box and we'll aim to answer them as we go through the webinar, but there'll also be time at the end to answer all questions. We'll have a Q&A. So having said that, I'm just going to hand over to my colleague, Megan.
Thank you, Gabriel. Okay, is that all clear?
It's loading. Yeah, I can see it now. Thank you.
Perfect. Okay, hello everybody. Thank you for joining us. As Gabriel said, I'm the Senior Scientific Projects Officer at Beacon, and before working at Beacon, I actually was an academic myself for a couple of years. So I hope today I will help you understand a bit about the academic landscape, who's involved, where it happens, and how you can get involved yourself. So in my 10-minute talk today, I'm going to take you through where the research happens, who you can reach out to, what translational research is, when you should get involved, and importantly, where you can begin. So firstly, an introduction to academic structures. So most of you probably are familiar with the fact that a lot of research takes place at universities. So universities conduct research across a range of disciplines. This can be biology, this can be chemistry, this can be psychology. And in the UK, we have 24 universities that are called Russell Groups. So these have high academic standards and they're known for their research excellence. So they get really good research funding and they have really good research that goes on. But in total, there are actually 84 universities that conduct research across the UK. So this is happening all across the country. Another place that research takes place is hospitals. So often what you'll find is there are teaching hospitals that are linked to universities. And these are generally places where more research happens in comparison to normal hospitals. So sometimes you'll find medical students that are training and doing research alongside, and they have facilities for excellent research. So some examples of this include the Queen Elizabeth Hospital in Birmingham, the Leeds Teaching Hospitals, and also the Cambridge University Hospitals. And then finally, research institutes. So a research institute is an organisation that the UK Research and Innovation, UKRI, has made a long-term funding investment. So essentially, these are big centres that have been given a pot of money that they can do their own research. So normally in a university, an academic might have to bring in their own funding, whereas these institutes have a secured amount of funding, which means they can bring in researchers from all over. And some examples of this include the Francis Crick Institute, the Rosalind Franklin Institute in Scotland, and also the Alan Turing Institute. And I think what I wanted to highlight about research institutes, well, there's two things really. Firstly, they make their research quite accessible. So if you, for example, were to go on the Francis Crick Institute website and you wanted to look up a specific topic of research, they actually have this all highlighted. So you can look at, for example, metabolomic research that's going on or research that's going on into kidneys. So it really breaks it down quite nicely for people to find out what is happening in this institute. And also something that I think could be important is the fact that these institutes have their own funding, which means that the academics that work there don't have to constantly be thinking about renewing funding and getting money in to continue projects. And I think this might be quite a nice way for them to then, when they are approached potentially for a separate project, they can bring in their own funding, but they don't have to be stressed about continually renewing this. And it means that they might be a little bit more invested into these independent projects. So I'm going to talk you briefly through the process of maybe someone who's coming out of their degree, science degree, and then they want to go into research and how this might progress, and then also introduce some of the names that you might hear, but you might not be so familiar with what this means. So you've finished your degree, you're interested in research, you want to become a trainee researcher. So some of the routes into this might be becoming a research technician, so working in a lab, helping out with the everyday basics to keep the lab running. You might want to do a master's, so you can do a master's of research or an MPhil. So this means for a year, you'll be given a research project, you'll have a question to answer, you'll be doing lab stuff, and you'll be essentially carrying out your own research for a short period of time. If you like that, if you do well, if you think this is a career route for you, you might want to do a PhD. So a PhD is a slightly longer programme. It's normally 4 years, and essentially you're working for 4 years doing research, trying to answer a specific question or understand a disease or a condition a little bit further. You finish this, you're interested in research, you want to carry it on, and this is when you might become a senior researcher. So a senior researcher is normally someone who's finished their PhD, And I've listed here 4 different terms for essentially the same thing. So depending on where you look in the country or what institute you look at, you might come across these terms. A postdoctoral researcher, a research assistant, a research fellow, and a research associate. Essentially, these are all people that have finished their PhD and are now doing their own research, usually within a lab under someone slightly more senior than them. And their main goal is to carry out research, but they might have a few more responsibilities, such as teaching and training, and things like that, but essentially lots of different terms for the same kind of role. And then finally, the more senior group leader positions. So you might come across a lecturer. So lecturers usually work for universities, and they don't always do research, but most of them do research alongside. Or a senior lecturer, again, someone just basically doing more research, more teaching, more responsibilities. And then a reader is a term that you might have or not heard of. It's essentially someone who is quite well established in their field. They've done lots of research, they've got lots of papers, they've got lots of achievements in their particular field. And it's just another accreditation, really. And then finally, a professor, which is the top tier, the top level that you can reach as an academic. And then also a group leader, which can, all of these things can also come under a group leader. You might run your own independent research group. To make things even more complicated, another term I want to introduce is a principal investigator. So a principal investigator is the lead researcher that's responsible for the overall leadership and management of a project. So they're involved in designing a project, conducting, reporting, and also they might manage a research team. And the reason that I think this is important is because you don't necessarily have to be a team leader to be a principal investigator. So you could be one of the more senior researchers, like a postdoctoral researcher, and you can be a principal investigator. Essentially, it all depends on if you've got publications and how much research you've done. And I think that's probably just important to note when you're thinking about who to approach. Another layer of complexity is the fact that you can also have clinical versus non-clinical researchers. So a clinical researcher is someone who has got a medical degree. This can be university clinical academics or NHS clinical academics. They've got their medical degree, and then they've also gone on to perhaps get a PhD and do research. And this is quite nice, I suppose, because you are still practicing as a clinician, but also doing research on the side. So I think you really get that patient interaction with the research that you do. Things to look out for. So I said there's lots of terms, lecturer, professor, who is doing research. I think most university websites are really good at highlighting this, but if you're unsure, usually there will be a section on the page which says research or research themes or publications, and this will give you an indication as to if they're actually involved in research or if they just teach, for example. And then I think importantly, who do you reach out to? So I think ultimately the point that I want to make here is that you can reach out to anyone. I was a postdoc, and if I was approached by a patient group, I would absolutely be happy to chat. And even if they might not be exactly the right person, it's just getting a connection in the lab. You know, the postdoc then might go and speak to the team leader and mention this, and it's just a way of getting in. So I think if you're constantly trying to get through to kind of a more senior academic and you're not having any luck, feel free to reach out to the postdocs and the PhD students. You know, they're all within the same lab. And it often is just the case that the senior academics are just really busy. So you might actually find that's a nicer route in. So I want to quickly highlight the process of translational research and then tie in where these academics might fit in. So I think essentially translational research is the idea of applying ideas, discoveries that you generate through basic biomedical research, and then making them into a means of preventing or curing or disease or diagnosing disease. It's quite a long process, and it doesn't always happen very quickly. So the first kind of few steps are basic biomedical research, discovery, design, and validation. So the basic biomedical research essentially explores the whys, the whats, the hows. It's understanding the fundamentals of a disease, of a condition, of a biological process. And then you move on to discovery, design, and validation. So you make these connections between the hows, the whats, the whys, and then how you can develop interventions for this. And then preclinical development is taking these interventions and testing them, so putting them into mice or animal models, using systems such as organoids, which are like 3D tissue cultures, or using cells that are taken from people, so you can understand how these discoveries that you make in the basic biomedical research, you can treat and prevent disease. And then you move on to clinical trials. So you've got early phase clinical trials. These are kind of phases 0, 1, and 2. They're looking at treatments in humans. They're looking at safety, dosing, efficacy. And then you can move on to the later phase clinical trials. So kind of comparing with treatments that are already available, and then also looking at like the long-term benefits, the long-term side effects once a drug has been licensed. And so in all of these stages, you might come across the different academics that I mentioned. So in the basic biomedical research, you might come across postdocs and senior lecturers, and the more like non-clinical side of it. And then in the clinical trial phases, you might come across the early phase. In the early phases, for example, you might come across the clinical researchers, so those that have also got the medical degree and the medical background. And then just in case you want to learn a bit more about clinical trials, we did a previous webinar which actually goes into much more detail, so you can learn all about like what happens in each phase, which I don't have time to go into today. So something that I also would like to briefly mention is a repurposing project. So this is when you take an existing drug that's already approved for human use, and you investigate whether it could be used to treat another condition. And the reason I want to highlight this is because sometimes it can actually speed up this process from basic biomedical research through to clinical trials, because a lot of the safety and the testing has already been done. And actually, there have been some examples of some really nice patient-led drug repurposing projects. So, for example, Hyposomnolence UK collaborated with Rare Disease Research Network for a condition called idiopathic hypersomnia. And this is a patient-led project that's trying to repurpose a drug for this condition. So I think it's quite important because it might be a faster approach to get treatment available. So the question, I suppose, that's important here is, when should I get involved? When should you get involved? And I think really it depends what you want to get out of this. So if you approach a researcher, an academic, a postdoc, for example, doing basic biomedical research, you might be able to understand something about a condition. You might understand the basic biology behind it, what's happening, if a gene has been mutated or a protein has been mutated, like why it's happening. But you won't necessarily then jump straight to getting a treatment or a prevention or a diagnosis, because obviously this takes a long time. Whereas if you want to get involved in clinical trials, you're obviously jumping in at a stage where there is a potential treatment that's being tested. So I think it's just really important to consider what you want to get out of it, and also that depending on who you speak to and who you reach out to, you know, you need to manage your expectations and the fact that you might not achieve like a drug or a diagnosis immediately. So I think importantly, I want to cover where to begin, because it's quite a big process. And I think some people might have a really clear vision in mind of how to be involved in research, and that's great. Alternatively, you might not know how you want to be involved. You just know that you want to, but you're not sure what your role could look like. So I think it's important to note that involvement in research can look like different things. So co-production is something that's really kind of coming to light at the moment, and this is the idea that research should be run essentially with you and not for you. And it's this idea that you're involved in the whole stage of research, so the thoughts, the design, and then through to the kind of the end of it. So it could be that you're involved in actually you've got an idea, you've got a proposal, you want to bring this forward. You might want to be involved in like study groups, like giving your thoughts on what research is happening, giving the patient perspective. You might want to help write a paper, so you can collaborate with academics to write a review, for example, to take all the literature that's out there and make sure that it's kind of accessible and compiled into one clear resource so that your community can find information. So there's different ways that you can get involved. And I think a really nice resource that's available is somewhere called the Rare Disease Research Network. So this is a really great place to start if you've got an idea that you want to make a reality. And what the RDRN does is they work with patient groups to help them develop ideas. So they ensure that projects are feasible, they help patient groups write proposals, and they also help develop teams of researchers and other appropriate stakeholders. So they pair the patient groups with the researchers. And I think this is a fantastic resource that could be really useful if you want to get a research project underway, but don't know where to start. And then some other resources that are available. So the NIHR has a Be Part of Research. So this is a site where you can go and see what projects are ongoing and you can sign up to be involved in them. And then this is a very similar one. So this is opportunities for public involvement in NHS, public health and social care research in the United Kingdom. So you can click here and you can, again, sign up for opportunities to get involved in the research. And then the co-production collective. So I mentioned that co-production is really quite important, and it's something that I think will be great in the future of designing research. This is a site where you can go, researchers, practitioners, public, all collaborate, and it's just bringing all these people together. And it's quite similar to the RDRN. So it's, again, this site where you can be paired with researchers, you can have help in developing your proposal, developing your project idea, making sure it's feasible, making sure it works, and actually getting these questions that you want answered. So in summary, research can take place at universities, in hospitals, in institutes, all over the UK. And I think hopefully all of these places have really good accessible websites where you can see what research is going on, what research themes are going on, who's doing the research. The principal investigator is the lead researcher responsible for the overall leadership and management of a project. And like I said, this doesn't necessarily have to be the group leader, the team leader. So this could be the postdoc. And I think that's important because I think essentially you can reach out to different members of the lab. It doesn't have to be the most senior academic. There are multiple stages to translational research, and I think it's really important to consider this before reaching out to academics, just so you can get everything that you want to get out of a collaboration, just so you know who is the right person to reach out to for what you want to achieve. And hopefully there are a number of useful resources for you to help you begin your research journey. And hopefully this is quite a nice oversight into kind of where to begin and what to do and who's what and where's where. So thank you. With that, I will stop sharing and then pass over to Mel.
Great. That was great, Megan. Thank you so much. I think that was really, really educational. And yeah, thank you for laying that foundation and that overview, which is much needed because I think the academic structures is something that you think it's simple, but then once you start digging in it, it's so complicated and there's so much to learn. So thank you so much for that. Yeah, so Mel, I'm gonna hand over to you and you can do your first part of your presentation.
Thank you. I'll just try and share my screen. Can you see the screen? Yes, I can now.
Nice. Just let me know when to change for the
Sorry,
slide.
yeah, you
Thank
can move
Mel.
on. Sorry, thank you. This is a picture of me and my husband with our 3 children. Just to give you a bit of background, this was taken 2.5 years ago, just before we got their diagnosis of an ultra-rare DHDDS genetic mutation. They'd had symptoms from a young age, and 2 years ago we got the call to say that their mutation was ultra-rare, newly discovered, neurodevelopmental, and had neurodegenerative consequences as well. At the point of our diagnosis, we were told that there were no plans to research DHDDS in the UK. So in ultra-rare cases such as ours, we were informed it's often down to the parents to help find and fund the cure or treatment. Next slide. So this is an example of the first scientific paper that we were referred to. I had no prior scientific knowledge outside of studying science up until about age 16. So I had to Google lots of the words. I didn't know lysosomes. I didn't know really about fibroblasts or myelinated fibers. So initially we were met with this barrier of these very heavy duty scientific papers that we couldn't really access. So in order to understand our disease, children's disease, we had to read the papers multiple times to get even the most basic understanding. But by Googling the words and rereading, we did start to get a level of understanding about their condition. And I'd say that's really the first step prior to connecting with scientists, is you need to understand your disease as best you can and know which disease it's possibly similar to. So in our case, we have overlap with lysosomal storage diseases and congenital disorders of glycosylation. So that immediately made me aware of which scientists I should start to connect with. I'd also add, and I didn't do this at the time because I didn't know about ChatGPT, but if you're struggling with the interpretations, you can just put it into ChatGPT. I tried it with this specific piece, and it did give a pretty accurate lay description when I typed it in and I asked it to give a lay description. I know you can't solely rely on that, but if you're struggling to understand, it's definitely a tool that can help. Next slide, please. So at the time of our diagnosis, we felt completely overwhelmed. There was no pathway for us, and we really did have no idea of which way to turn. We desperately wanted to create a treatment pathway for our children, but had no advice on how to do so. One thing we did know, though, is that in order to create this pathway, we would need to start making connections with scientists. Next slide, please. So where do we turn for support? Fortunately for me, one of my friends had already worked with Beacon. Whilst I was sort of immersing myself in all the scientific literature, I reached out to Beacon and did the mentorship scheme on setting up a charity. So that was giving me the tools I needed to found our charity. We also have now connected with Unique, who have helped us actually connect with a number of academics, and also I know quite a few people have benefited from connections with Swan UK and Genetic Alliance as well, who isn't there. Next slide, please. So how did we find our scientific advisors? The very first step was to read every piece of literature specifically on DHDDS. Because we were ultra rare and newly discovered, there weren't loads of papers. There were probably only about 10 or 15 papers when we started. We connected with, or tried to connect, I should say, with every scientist that had published a paper. And I was informed where it says sort of authors in blue. It was one of the lovely parents on the Beacon program that showed me that's the first author and the last author that are the key contributors to a publication. So that's where we started. We contacted the first and last author on every publication related to DHDDS. And then I started to expand it out. Once I'd contacted those in studying DHDDS, I then started to contact other scientists that had published on lysosomal storage disorders that we seem similar to, and also to scientists working with congenital disorders of glycosylation. In addition to this, I would listen to podcasts on related conditions to educate myself, and webinars, basically anything and everything. And I would also contact the scientists that had appeared on the webinars or podcasts, anyone that I thought might possibly be able to help us or support us on this journey. And as soon as we formed the charity, or even prior to forming the charity, I requested that, would they possibly be interested in being a scientific advisor for us. I really didn't think anyone would say yes, but we had a really positive response from those that did get back to us. Next slide, please. Another way we contacted, we got in touch with scientists was by targeting the relevant scientific events and conferences. So I think I probably attended about 20 events last year, and prior to each event, I would look at the programme to see who was speaking. I would also often offer to speak on a programme, because I find if you've got that platform and you're up on the stage, then those that are potentially interested in doing something with you do come up to you and connect with you. So I think speaking at conferences is a really good way of doing it, but also if you're not speaking, to connect with people prior to these events. So if there was somebody that I thought, you know, may possibly be interested in DHDDS, working on a similar condition, I would email them prior to the event or try and connect with them on LinkedIn, and to see if we could book a slot to speak. And I found, although I haven't had loads of scientific connections this way, we've definitely made a fair number through attending events. Next slide. Another way that we have connected with more academics and scientific advisors is also through larger disease collaboratives that we've worked with. And this is again where understanding your disease is key, because then you know which umbrella organisations are most relevant to you. So we've connected with the LSD Collaborative and UK RET, UK Rare Epilepsies Together, and CDG UK, and we go to meetings that they hold, and through that we've learned about other rare diseases similar to ours. We've also been able to cross connect with scientific advisors like that we may have had, and then they have, so sort of sharing information that way. And I would also add here that I think people that are, I'm sure everyone's aware of this anyway, but that are running the rare disease charities, all these umbrella organisations, are genuinely some of the most kind, supportive people you could ask for, and they've been really helpful in guiding us and making these connections with scientific researchers and academics. So that's it for that part of the session. That's sort of the start of our story.
Thank you, Mel. That was great. Thank you for sharing everything you did back then. It seems a lot, and it's really inspiring, I feel, for everyone that in this webinar today. So I'm just going to hand over to Rick now, who will introduce the next topic.
There we go. I lost my mic button there. See my screen okay, everybody? Beautiful. Okay. I'm not seeing the right thing here. Perfect. So, hi guys. It's really good to be here today and to talk about one of the really thorny, sticky, tricky topics that's been plaguing, I think, the rare disease ecosystem since I've been involved, and probably long before. How do you find an academic to actually help you push things forward? And this is not an easy question to answer. And Mel has already done a great job to begin to answer it. And Megan certainly gives us some insights and guidance of how you can think about tapping into that area. So my job is just to sum things up a little bit in midway through, refocus on it, and then let Mel go off and dive more into some of the work that she's been doing, which is fantastic. So hopefully there's a few tips and tricks in here for your great researcher hunt. So obviously, whenever you start one of these things, the first thing you've got to answer is, why do you want to find an academic? And I think we all know the answer there is because they have the keys to the science, if you like. They can help you understand what it is that's really going on with your condition, and therefore hopefully have the potential to implement new treatments or transform the landscape for people living with your disease. Fundamentally, though, we talk about these things, I think, in very big picture terms. We talk about trying to create research interest in disease mechanisms, to spearhead new treatment developments, to bring large amounts of funding into your field, to change disease treatment paradigms, and identify new avenues for research and collaboration. These are big, sweeping, impactful things we want to see for our conditions. Fundamentally, though, we want to ensure that the research that happens follows the patient need, so we get research that's relevant and develop the treatments that we want to see. And these are big deals and big questions for us to tackle. But there are really clear, distinct, practical things we're looking for as well. That might be to sit on a science advisory board, as Mel's mentioned, to help write treatment management or treatment guidelines. to ensure the accuracy of patient-friendly information. You know, we often spend our time as charities translating all the scientific jargon into something that makes sense. We want to make sure that still tells the truth. Helping to advocate to bring funding to your patients, and fundamentally just answer one specific research question that really matters today. These things are a bit more practical and tangible, and can be an important way to help us find a hook to pull academics into our research. Because when seeking those researchers and getting that conversation, it's really easy to focus on these big picture things that we've listed here. But it is important to remember that these can be quite daunting. Academics are people too, and they probably don't think they are the person that can transform your rare disease or that can change the situation for a whole population. That can be quite daunting to them. And equally, those that are really smart will also know it takes a huge amount of time and effort that they may not feel they can spare. So going in with these big picture asks can be challenging because it makes it hard for them to say yes to you because they don't feel they're the person to tackle that problem. The average academic is in it to answer some questions in a topic they think is interesting, not necessarily to change the world. So if that's the case, trying to go in with some of these more practical asks might make things more simple for you and might help you find that initial connection. You've got to hook them in, essentially. Practical, time-bound, short-term tasks that can show them they can help you now and they can do something for a short period to make a difference are more likely to get yeses. They're going to be less intimidating, and they give you a chance to work alongside those academics to build a relationship and basically hook them in so they can't really run away and build a long-term lasting relationship for you and your patient organization. So always think about finding a hook or a way to make it easy for academics to help you. And the search itself is not an easy thing. Mel's already listed some great ways and approaches you can use. There's nothing really unique here I'm going to touch on. Fundamentally, though, it's just important to recognize and acknowledge that it isn't an easy fix for this. I've been asked how to find academics for 10 years, and I still don't really think I've got an easy answer. It essentially requires a lot of work, and there's going to be a slog to do it, especially in some of the ultra-rare conditions that really aren't been actively researched. If you accept that, though, and you deploy lots of different opportunities and take every window you can, you will get success in the end. The three major areas I think you can work in when doing this search are kind of mundane desk research, sitting at a computer and finding things on Google, networking, and tapping into the knowledge within your community. And again, there's nothing really that Mel hasn't touched on, but fundamentally the desk research is all about using the internet to find people with an interest in your condition. And a lot of these people won't know they have an interest in your condition. It's finding people that know things about the gene that might be affected, different mutant variants. It's finding people who know about the pathways that are of interest to your disease, the symptoms or therapies that could be deployed or are being used there. As Mel says, it's about knowing your condition really well first to allow you to find the connections you need to pull academics in. And you can find these people by searching institutional websites, learned societies. So, for example, there's a large society that looks at inborn errors of metabolism, essentially rare metabolic conditions, a group of researchers who care about that, or looking through conference abstracts. And as Mel says, looking at the program for a conference can be a great way of doing it. And abstracts at scientific conferences are often released in advance, so you can see who's going to talk about things that might be relevant. What it comes down to, though, is you're going to need to look at papers, and you're going to spend time looking at the delightful website of PubMed. And as Mel's again hinted at beautifully, there are ways to think about looking at papers. So this is a bit of a paper I pulled off the internet last night, and I'm just going to point to a few things that are relevant. Firstly, at the top here, we see the delightful, pleasing words open access, which tells us this paper is free to view. You can read the whole thing without paying any money. Unfortunately, the majority of papers, particularly before maybe 5 or 10 years ago, are still going to be behind a paywall. You're going to need to pay money to read the whole thing, unless you already have a tame-friendly academic who can hopefully access the papers through their institution. Obviously, looking for the author list is really crucial, and absolutely the first person on that list is a key thing to pick out, because they probably wrote the paper and probably did a fair chunk of the work in the research you're looking at. It's fair to say the second person may have supported them a fair bit, so it could be worth peeping at. And the last person on the list is almost invariably the person that either supervised the work or at least their group funded the research. And they're going to be a more senior scientist who probably knows a fair bit about the wider field and could be useful for the connections you want to make. Everyone else in the list probably contributed in a range of different ways, which could be very small to quite large, but they're not necessarily as relevant for you to dive into researching initially. But do keep an eye out for this tiny little envelope sign. That tends to mean they're the corresponding author, so the author who was kind of nominated to be the first point of contact to share their details and to engage with people inquiring about their papers. They're certainly worth reaching out to as well. When you look at a paper, you'll also see an abstract. So this should summarize everything that happened in the study in a very succinct way. But I think it's fair to say that when scientists are given a word limit, they tend to crack out all the acronyms and make things somewhat less accessible. So don't be surprised if an abstract is hard to read. If you have access to the full paper, you will see that increasingly there are papers out there that have lay summaries that might make things easier to read. If not, then you could try and look into the last few paragraphs of the introduction, which tends to be designed to give you an idea of what the researchers did and why they did it, or the first few paragraphs of the discussion, which should give you an idea of what they found and what it could mean. And I think these are two of the areas where you may get a more explanatory overview of the paper itself without having to wade yourself through the methods section, which I would tend to recommend you avoid at all costs. If you've done your desk research, you can then think about the networking side of things. And really, this is about getting out there and seeing people. And Mel's touched on it crucially here. What you need to do is make yourself visible or target the people you want to speak to. You go where the academics are and you find a way to make them come to you or make them talk to you. You don't want to invest a huge amount of time and money on travel to multiple conferences and just assume you're going to be found. It has to be an active role for you guys, and exhibiting or talking is a great way to make people more inclined to speak to you and come and approach you. So don't be scared and put yourself outside of your comfort zone. That will give you a better chance of making the connections that you need. Finally, and obviously, I do think that community knowledge is really key, and you should never underestimate the knowledge and connections that exist within your patient community. There's a fair chance that pretty much everyone in the community you're working with is at least speaking to some kind of clinician or doctor at some stage. And if you happen to find out that there's one clinician that's treating 3, 4, 5, 6 different families, that clinician is probably going to want to learn more about disease and might be a really great place to start for engaging with a research community. Similarly, there may be people in your community who are themselves life scientists, and they could almost act as a pseudo-scientific advisor to help you wade through the inaccessible scientific lingo in these papers to really make you better understand what's going on in the scientific space of your disease area. My final major point is, what are you looking for when you're trying to seek an academic? And it's easy to try and think you want to find the most senior person who's well-known and visible. Robert Winston here, great mustache, and also widely seen on television. We all want to have someone like him working us with if we can. And there's a huge benefit to this, because if he says your group name, it's going to be heard by lots of people and give you visibility and credibility, which is very valuable. But he isn't going to get in the lab very much and crack the disease mechanism for you. And he's not going to be able to give you very much of his time because he's got pulls all over the place on things he should be doing. On the right-hand side, we have Dr. Natasha Spottiswoode, who through her PhD work has inadvertently become a world expert on a highly rare infectious amoeba. She's now working across the world with collaborators trying to find a way to treat these patients, and they're so rare it's crazy. But she, as an early career researcher, is on the ground doing the work and developing a career based on this rare connection. Always look at the early career researchers as much as the big names, because they might be the ones who can gain a massive interest in your work, learn to work with you and grow with you, and be the one that may, in a few years' time, transform your field in a way you couldn't foresee. So in summary, researchers are people too. They get scared sometimes and they are busy. So make it easy for them to help you by asking for their help at first with a really practical problem, and aim to gradually win their commitment. That will make the big difference. Be prepared to find connections. That won't necessarily just be between people, but between your research, your disease, and other areas, because those are the ways you're going to bring researchers into your disease that didn't even know about it or didn't even realize they were interested in it. Show researchers what working with you offers them. Yes, people want to help, but they also are self-interested. And if you can show how working with a patient community can help their career move forward or access new types of data or do research in a better way, they're going to be far more compelled to try and support you. So don't be ashamed of selling yourself and making it clear how you can help them move forward. And fundamentally, just accept that identifying research is hard, and use every connection, every trick available to you to make it a simpler task. If you keep doing the work, you will get there eventually, sometimes much easier than you think, and sometimes after a long slog, but don't be afraid to push on with it. So with that, I'll say thank you, and I'll pass back to Mel to hear more of her fantastic progress. So I will press stop, and Mel, please go ahead.
Yeah, I'll start by what in our experience we've seen academics have wanted. So once we founded our charity Cure DHDDS 2 years ago, we were wanting to be very actively supporting research. There wasn't even very much basic research happening into DHDDS, so we were really starting from scratch. So when I was contacting the academics, it quickly became clear to me that these were the key things that they were wanting. So support with funding. They wanted an organised patient community. So when there were requirements, for example, for samples or for information, we could connect with the patients and feed back to them. They also wanted collaboration with other scientific groups working within our area. Although in some cases we've had to tread carefully because there's competition between groups, but overall there was a strong desire for collaboration, and also for they wanted a better understanding of the disease, and they wanted us to help with setting up a patient registry and also a natural history study of the disease. So fundraising, this was everything was sort of working in parallel at the same time, but we were very proactively trying to raise money. We found that there wasn't really any seed funding for DHDDS because no research was happening, so we had to supply that seed funding in the hope that it could then lead us on to bigger grants. So we've done everything from my husband did a tandem cycle ride in a lab coat from Land's End to John O'Groats, big community walks, bucket shakes, auctions. We've worked hard to be in the press to raise awareness, although that doesn't necessarily translate into funding. It certainly helped raise awareness of our disease, and it meant that some of the scientists, it helped again some of the scientists that had never heard of it, and also patients that didn't know that there was a charity there for DHDDS. It helped make those connections. So growing our patient community, this is another key thing that we were asked to do for the scientists. They didn't just want our children as patients, they wanted us to grow, to get a full idea of the full spectrum of what it means to have DHDDS. So we, through Facebook, that we connected with one other patient, and we've now grown that Facebook community to 150 families, which is really helping us to gain a better understanding of what the progression looks like of the disease over time, and also how the full spectrum of symptoms that patients experience. And this is vital information for further down the line as well, when we're looking for treatments, to be able to test the efficacy of treatments, so we have a better idea of the benefits of the treatments. And our patient community has been really supportive in joining our patient registry as well, which again is capturing more information about the natural history of the disease. So here again, this is when we've held our conferences, which I'll go on to in a moment. The key things that we've been told, like when I've asked, like what's the main things that we can do to help expedite research, and like what a few of the scientists like, well, I'll give you 3 words: natural history, or 6 words. Basically, natural history study. There's like the biggest thing that you can do for us is keep growing that patient community. They're now all being seen by one clinician in the US, where she's doing sort of ICAR scores and assessments on a 6-monthly interval, so that they're really growing the understanding of DHDDS. And as I said, that's being complemented by the patient registry, which was free to set up with Cords at Sanford. Another key area of what the scientists communicated that they wanted, as I mentioned, was collaboration. So I think our role has really been to help find the missing pieces of the research puzzle by helping bring our scientific community together. So Costello Medical has now supported us with 4 virtual conferences. We've got the 5th one coming up in April, where we've brought together the scientists that are studying DHDDS. We've asked them each to do a 5-minute presentation on the work that they're doing, and then there's question time, and then after each presentation. So after the first one, the feedback was really positive. They talked about how invaluable these meetings were to keeping up the momentum in our research community. And I really do feel they've been key to keeping research going. It gives them a deadline every 6 months where they're going to be presenting their findings. It also means, it's not officially peer reviewed, but it's being reviewed by other scientists, their work. So there will be questions raised, and it just helps, I think, make the research be as streamlined and effective as it possibly can be. So by doing this, this gives you an idea of what we've been able to achieve by growing our scientific community, by helping with fundraising, by better understanding the disease and knowing which scientists to reach out to. I think we've now got 16 projects up and running, some which we've provided seed funding for, some which, because of the overlap with other conditions, it's been able to be come under existing grants. And so there's a real mixture there. As was mentioned previously, we've been looking at drug repurposing because it's a quicker way to potentially access a treatment, as well as ASO and gene therapies. We've been going down that route too. We've got 3 mouse models in development, 2 at JAX Labs and 1 in Canada, and various different studies going on internationally. And I think with rare diseases, it's really important to have that international collaboration, because your specialists and your patient groups will be all over the world. And this is now some of the research articles that we've been involved with through either funding or bringing the patient communities together. So the first article is related to a drug screen we did with a drug repurposing company in the US, Palara, who specializes in repurposing for congenital disorders of glycosylation. So again, I knew that they worked in our specialist area, so that's why we targeted them for research. And we now have, I think, 7 DHDDS patients trialing a supplement which you can access, from any health food shop, with showing some efficacy. It's not a cure for our disease, but it seems to be improving the phenotype, and they're also seeing that it has a beneficial effect in some of the disease models that we have. Also, the next article is related to our natural history study, whereby they're now collecting these more and more patients to better understand the disease. That's now been published. And then in terms of drug repurposing, the final article, where it talks about us repurposing miglustat for DHDDS. We found, again, through understanding our disease, we had a very similar cell phenotype to Niemann-Pick C disease, which has a number of FDA-approved treatments. So that has opened up opportunities there for us to repurpose miglustat potentially for DHDDS patients. So we're now working with the scientists to do that, and we've done in each of these projects, we've provided the skin fibroblast, not just for our children, but we've brought our patient communities come together to provide skin fibroblasts. They provide blood samples. For other projects, they've provided brain scans, and this is all through our Facebook group. We harness that to bring our community together, and that's how we've been able to move the research forward and get the samples we need to better understand the disease and start looking towards treatments. Finally, I'd just like to say, and I don't know where people are on their journey, but if you don't have a research community, don't be afraid to create one. There was absolutely nothing in place when we started on this journey 2 years ago. And while I'm not saying it's easy, it has been challenging, and you have had to, as Rick said, I've had to totally take myself out of my comfort zone to make these connections, but the rewards really do pay off, because we're now at a point where we are looking at potentially translational research, given that there was that very basic initial understanding of our disease. I think we've made really good progress, and I think the way we've been able to do that is by focusing one step at a time. If I was trying to have this, if I knew I was trying to have this outcome 2 years ago, I would have felt even more overwhelmed than I did. But by focusing on each step at a time, it is possible. That's it. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Mel. That's really, really inspiring and really impressive journey as well. Really glad to hear everyone, I think, is saying the same thing in chat, that it's really just a really inspiring journey, that the impact that's made. So thank you for sharing that. And I'm just gonna lastly hand over to Laura, who is from EATRIS and also from the Instituto Ramón y Cajal. Thank you, Laura, for being with us today. So I'm just gonna hand over to you.
Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you very much, Gabriel, and thank you very much, Beacon, for inviting me to this interesting webinar. It's a pleasure to be here with you. Being an academic research, which actually you mentioned many times, let's see if my vision as a researcher is also informative for you. So let's try to share my presentation. Okay, so first of all, I should say, following Rick's presentation, that Beacon is extremely effective and has high efficacy in approaching researchers, since basically I am here because I met Beacon and all the team in one of the projects of EATRIS. So you can say that you met expectation and as Gabriel mentioned, I am a researcher in Spain that also contribute to one of the main European research infrastructure, EATRIS, which is actually a research infrastructure for translational medicine and for personalized medicine. So today in my presentation, apart from sharing with you my personal experience as a researcher, I want to convince you that EATRIS is basically working for you as patient. EATRIS is one of the main research infrastructure that operates in Europe. These research infrastructure basically are huge and large networks of researchers, all of us pushing for providing solution to all of you, to all of the patients. Basically, EATRIS is at the end of the process in the translational research, and many of the projects that we perform inside EATRIS are addressing preclinical and clinical studies, as Megan mentioned in her presentation. So what we are doing in EATRIS, basically, as you see in my slide, our mission is trying to accelerate as much as possible the research discovery in order to implement them in the clinical practice. So as you see in my slide, patient is at the center of our effort as researchers, in academia, as a clinician, as an industry. And what we are doing is just supporting with our capacities and our expertise all those that need research to give a solution to patients. Even though IATRIS is working mainly in Europe, we are part of a global alliance called Translation Together, and we are collaborating with centers in United States as ENCAT, in Japan, in Australia as a therapeutic innovation, or even in Brazil as a Fundación Osvaldo Cruz, which actually point out that researchers, we are all collaborating, we are all pushing for providing solution to patients as much as we can. How we do that? Basically, what we do is provide services. For example, you were mentioning about mutation, etc. So in IATRIS, we are able to perform sequencing and give the information to patients or to academics, just in case there is a mutation underlying the pathology. We also develop tools, some of them very practical for patients, and I will give an example later on. We also try to train the next generation of researchers in order to continuing in the effort of providing solution to patients. And also we try to dynamize as much as possible the ecosystem for personalized medicine. I am proud to present here today the way I met Beacon, thanks to the Remedy for All platform, the platform that is focused on repurposing of drugs, especially for rare disease. There is sometimes not many therapeutic options, and as all we know, big pharma sometimes doesn't put too much effort in discovering new drugs because the market is small. So IATRIS is giving an answer to this and set up this platform that try to unveil new uses for all drugs that has been proved as safe drugs and efficient drugs in other pathologies. So researchers here, we unveil the molecular mechanisms and the molecular actions of the drugs in order to propose the use of a drug in a new context, particularly rare disease. This has been done inside Remedy for All for an osteogenesis imperfecta, for a metabolic disease with a mutation in an enzyme, and also for pancreas cancer that, as you know, is a rare tumor with no many therapeutic options up to date. So for that, in Remedy for All, and my lab and me as a researcher, I am involved in providing new solution to pancreas cancer patient, combining the classical chemotherapy, gemcitabine plus Abraxane, with two very safe drugs that are already used for other pathologies, particularly simvastatin, that all you know is used for lowering the cholesterol levels in blood, and valproic acid that is used for epilepsy. So in this moment, thanks to Remedy for All and in the scenario of IATRIS and with the participation of Beacon, we are performing a clinical trial with pancreas cancer patients, offering them not only the chemotherapy, also the combination with simvastatin and valproic acid. And I hope soon we will have good news for this patient. Time and attending the patient situation, we are along this project having dialogues and involving patients, as for example, Richard Bach, that is a patient champion for pancreas cancer, is a long survival of pancreas cancer. We are meeting him every 3 months, and we are asking him for advice, share with us the real concerns of patients, that sometimes these concerns are not the one that are not the one which researchers are focused. For example, researchers most of the time are pretty obsessed and focused on efficacy of the drugs, and sometimes Richard put us on the table that apart from the efficacy, toxicity and quality of life is really important for patients. So as a researcher, we should attend not only efficacy of drugs, rather than low toxicity and high quality of life for patients. As you can see in the slide, in the lower right part, these are the original notes that we are taking all the time that we met Richard, and there are words like hope, like quality of life, that he is all the time insisting on them. Another project that is currently ongoing inside EATRIS, having also the patient in the center, is EATRIS Connect, which actually is trying to develop a tool for based on artificial intelligence in order to identify as soon as possible people with high risk of pancreas cancer development. We know that there are familial history in pancreas cancer, and there are also mutations that can prompt patients to pancreas cancer, like, for example, KRAS mutation or P53 mutation. So a bunch of researchers inside EATRIS, we are all together working for ending in a trustworthy AI tool that allows the clinician, in case of a familiar of pancreas cancer, determine the risk of this person for developing in the future pancreas cancer. And we are doing all of them thanks to patients, as I mentioned, in close collaboration with many European organizations of patients. And actually, EATRIS delivered a tool, as I mentioned before, an open access tool that is the Patient Engagement Resource Center, where researchers and many other important stakeholders for personalized medicine can find documents, protocols, procedures, how to engage from the very beginning patients in the research development. I kindly invite you to enter in this resource center and give us your feedback as patients in order to improve as much as possible this toolkit for researchers addressing your involvement in our research. As Gabriel mentioned, I have the honor to be the National Director of the EATRIS Spanish Node. EATRIS Spanish Node includes 33 health research institutes. It's a special model that we have in Spain based on hospitals. All the health research institutes should include a hospital. For example, my institute is based on Ramón y Cajal Hospital in Madrid, one of the main hospitals in Madrid, and include more than 1,000 researchers. We have more than 30 in Spain as Ramón y Cajal, and a couple of years ago, thanks to EATRIS, we have the opportunity to join all these health research institutes, working for more than 6 months, and at the end, deliver a simple strategy for our health research institute involve patients in their daily life. So thanks to EATRIS and also with the collaboration of European Organization of Patients, we end in a strategy, as you see in my slide, building an efficient patient engagement strategy in Health Research Institute with 4 strategic lines, page and a half, not more, but with practical indication to the Health Research Institute in order to have patients from the very beginning of the research. We are continuing with this effort of this strategy, and for example, now in my own Health Research Institute, Ramón y Cajal, this is the banner of my institute. What we are doing is including patient and patient representative in all our governance bodies, let's say. For example, few months ago, we include Paula Echeverría, belonging to the biggest organization of patients in Spain, POP, is now part of our scientific external advisory board, and we are in negotiation for her being part of the board of governors of Ramón y Cajal. Our experience in Ramón y Cajal will be exportable to other health research institutes in Spain. We are delivering a document in order to share with our Health Research Institute, our broader Health Research Institute, how we are doing in Ramón y Cajal for involving patients in the highest level of governance of our institution. And the last thing that I want to share with you is another strategic approach that we are having in Spain. We have all these Health Research Institute, we have a main funding body that is called Instituto de Salud Carlos III. And this main funding body is providing funding every year to all the Health Research Institute in ways of grants, contracts for human resources, etc. Any single grant that any single researcher send to Instituto de Salud Carlos III as an applicant in order to be evaluated and finally to decide if is funded or not, every single application is also evaluated by patients, by the biggest organization of patients, as I mentioned, POP. So this is an example of report. Sorry, it's in Spanish, but it's a way to show you that every single application as a researcher, we receive a strategic evaluation from the patient. For example, this is the last grant that as a researcher I sent last year for funding. I was very happy because finally it was funded. My grant was devoted to demonstrate that if we combine immunotherapy plus radiotherapy in the case of renal carcinoma, we can get better responses in patients. My grant include a small clinical trial to prove this, apart from several questionnaires for quality of life provided to the patient which participate in the clinical trial. And all this, apart from being evaluated from the methodological point of view as a scientific methodology, it was also evaluated by patients. Actually, half of the score was provided by this patient evaluation. I got high score in the strategic evaluation from patient, and finally I got the grant. So I want to share how Spain, as a nodo teatris, we are trying to involve as much as possible patient and also citizen in our daily life working all together for fighting pathologies. Last slide, just to give you an idea, and I want to introduce with me David, that is our national coordinator of FEATRIS. Both of us, we are going to meetings and going to any forum available for sharing with patients our activity in the EATRIS Spanish node. We have participated in POF meetings in the Spanish organization POP. We have also having different presentation in different Spanish institute. Actually, today we are connecting from one of these Spanish institute from Aragon, in order to all the researchers in Spain to be aware how to include patients from the very beginning in the research. That's it. Thank you very much for giving us the opportunity to share our experience with you. I'm happy to answer questions wherever is appropriate.
That's great. Thank you very much, both Laura and David, for being here and for showing everything that you've done in EATRIS and the Ramon y Cajal Institute and the Carlos III Institute as well. It's really, really impressive as well to see all the different patient engagement projects that are happening and all of the involvement that you guys have had. So thank you for coming along as well. So now we'll just have some time, not much, but we'll have some time for some Q&A. So if anyone's got any questions, please put them in the chat or in the Q&A box and we'll go through them. So I'll just like to invite Mel to turn her camera on, if that's okay, and Megan as well. I can see Rick's got his camera on as well. And yeah, I'll just go through one question that we've got for Mel. So
Yeah.
someone's asking, Mel, how successful were you with getting new interest from scientists? For example, contacting scientists who work on similar diseases but not the same one. I've tried this and they just ignore me.
Yeah, I mean, it's not easy. We started by working on the ones specifically that had written the papers on DHDDS. And what I found worked for us is once I had engagement from somebody that worked on DHDDS, but say other similar conditions, once she'd agreed to be our scientific advisor, that really helped garner interest from other scientists. I think when I was writing to those scientists that say work on other similar diseases, I would say this professor has just recently agreed to be a member of our scientific advisory board. We're trying to grow that community, so it sort of becomes almost a part of a club that they may potentially be interested to join. So that was my tactic. But I would say, you know, for every 20, 30, 40 emails I would send, you know, I would get 1 or 2 responses, and I would have to send every email 1, 2, 3 times before I gave up. I would really give it a good go, and then the next year I'd probably try again. So a lot of work does go into chasing and trying to think of creative ways to make scientists more interested. And then when you get an update as well, potentially with, if there is more overlap with a similar disease, if you have that, then connect with them again if they haven't got back to you, and give them that new piece of information and just say, I thought you might be interested. But you do have to be persistent.
Sure, yeah, thank you, Mel. I think that was really clear. We've got another question for Laura as well. Someone's asking, can groups from outside the EU engage with your organization?
Yes, with any health research institute, we are willing to have you. And also, since EATRIS as a research infrastructure is part of Translation Together, all of you are very welcome. So yes, please contact us and get engaged. We learn a lot from you.
That's great. That's a great answer. Thank you, Laura. I'm really glad to hear that as well, because it's something that I personally myself was wondering too, because all of these barriers that they keep creating, UK, EU, but it's so nice to hear that we can still collaborate and we can still work together. So that's great. Cool. I'm just going to have a look if there's any more questions for either of you guys. So please, any of the attendees, if you have any more questions, this is your time before we wrap up the session.
I'm going to ask Mel quickly if I can. Mel, you mentioned rightly in your talk that getting international engagement is really important. I just wondered how you tackled that, because obviously we had some discussion in the chat about the challenge of getting in person to events. When you've got to go in person internationally, it becomes an even bigger barrier. So how did you engage internationally in the stuff that you did?
We actually found the international engagement easier than the UK engagement. So our first scientific advisors were from the US, followed by Germany and Italy before I had anyone from the UK interested. And I think that's because they were more interested in our disease. So I had to build up the international collaborative really before the UK scientists were interested in us. So it was the other way around. I think it really depends on where the specialists are in your disease area, or if, like you say, if they've seen patients. The first one that took us on had seen 2 or 3 DHDDS patients, and she was a clinician and a researcher. So she was a great first contact for us.
That's great. Thank you, Mel. And we have one last question that we can do today. So someone's asking for you as well, Mel, how difficult would you say is organizing the scientific meetings? I know you use Costello, but do you think it's possible for a small patient group to do it by themselves?
Yes. So Costello now, the first one they did for us, it was much more hands-on, whereby they showed me the templates to use, etc. But now really they're just there as a sort of background support. So we do most of it ourselves. They sort of just make sure that they keep us on track. I mean, I do think it is. It's just okay as long as I think you set yourself a schedule of timelines leading up to the conference date. You will already probably be connected with all the scientists that you want to invite. We kept ours for ease, just scientists at this. So it's a scientific conference. Patients don't attend. But what we do afterwards is a lay report for the patient community so that they can understand. So I suppose that took a level of complication out of our conference. And I think being virtual, it's much easier to arrange than an in-person conference, especially if you've got international scientists that you want to attend.
That's great. Thank you, Mel. Well, if that's the case and if there's no more questions, I think I'm just going to wrap up the session. But of course, thank you everyone for coming, and thank you the speakers for giving such engaging and really, really important presentations. So I'm just going to share my screen again. Cool. So I'd just like to tell you about upcoming events that are happening here at Beacon. Obviously, we're doing the Cambridge Rare Disease Showcase again this year. It's happening on the 18th of June, 2025 in Cambridge. It's an in-person event, and it's a great event in my humble opinion. I was there last year. It's a great opportunity to network and to meet many other patient advocates and also researchers, industry professionals, literally everyone you can imagine. It's a great event. But you don't have to trust me, because I'll show you some statistics from last year in a minute. But before I move to the next slide, sorry, you can get a £5 off discount if you get a ticket before the 11th of April. So make sure that you go and check it out. But this is what some attendees were saying last year. 100% of them would recommend the Rare Disease Showcase, and 100% made meaningful new connections. And 89% felt a greater sense of belonging to the rare disease community as well. We're also co-organizers of the Medicines Reimagined Drug Repurposing Conference, which is an international conference taking place on the 7th and 8th of May this year, again in Amsterdam. Again, it's a great opportunity to meet many other patients, advocates, researchers, industry, policymakers, funders. It's an event that invites a wide, diverse audience. So again, great to meet other people and to listen to the international work that people are doing in drug repurposing. There's some travel bursaries that we've just reopened. Please note that the deadline is tomorrow, and this offers a free conference ticket and up to €200 support towards travel and accommodation for patient group representatives. So if you'd be interested in attending this conference, this is a great opportunity to apply, but please ensure that you do this by the end of tomorrow. We have some upcoming training, which will be an in-person masterclass happening in the Royal Institution in London, and it's going to be on networking with purpose and how to create lasting connection. It'll happen on the 25th of June, but please scan this QR code if you'd like to subscribe to our newsletter and know what's happening on all the upcoming training that we're doing. because it's due to be announced very soon. So consider yourself lucky that we're talking about it today. Of course, I'd like to say thank you to our supporters again, the Community Fund, Vertex, and Amicus, and our speakers too. And of course, I'd like to ask for your thoughts on what you thought about this webinar. This is not just a nice thing to have for us. It is essential for us to be able to deliver this really important training. So please take some time. It'll take 2 or 3 minutes to fill out a survey at the end of the webinar that you'll be redirected to once I close it. And yeah, lastly, of course, I'd like to thank everyone that came along, also our speakers, including Mel. Thank you so much for your presentation, Rick and Megan, of course, and Laura and David. That was great as well to hear from you and all the work you've done in Spain and across the EU. And of course, all the attendees for coming along. So that's everything on my side. If you have any questions, please do reach out and we'll aim to answer them. We've recorded this session, we'll share the slides, so keep an eye out on your emails and please fill out the survey once I close this webinar. Thank you, have a good day.